Today's wish comes from Dr. Britt Andreatta. Britt is the CEO of Brain Aware Training, and she's also the former chief learning officer at lynda.com, now LinkedIn Learning. Her online courses have been viewed more than 10 million times, and she's worked with multiple Fortune 100 companies, as well as with leading educational institutions to deliver brain-based learning solutions. Britt is the author of 4 books, most recently Wired to Become. Hey, Britt, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. It's really exciting to talk to you and your listeners today.
So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish more people knew that emotional intelligence is the pathway to better well-being.
So that concept of becoming healthier and happier at work, it's more important today than ever with all the stressors that are in the workplace. You've identified some very interesting research around the cost of having a toxic workplace. Maybe we can start there. Why is it so important that companies address this issue right now?
Well, research is showing that a toxic company culture is 10.5 times more powerful than compensation in predicting their attrition rate, how much people will leave that workplace. We know that 87% of employees say they've been under a toxic manager, and a third of employees are actively seeking a therapist to address that relationship. Almost 53% say they have nightmares. 34% drink or overeat as a coping mechanism. So you can see that this leaving toxic people in place generates all kinds of costs, both physical and emotional.
Do you think this has gotten worse recently, or have these numbers held pretty steady?
I think these numbers probably have increased a little bit since the pandemic. Just everyone's burned out and nobody's really their best self. So we're probably seeing more managers engaging in behaviors that they might not have done before. I think we have a pretty exhausted and burned out workforce at every level. But I also think that we've moved into a focus of well-being. And I think people are also paying more attention to how their workplace makes them feel, where maybe they would have just kind of accepted that as a status quo before.
Right. So the things that we might have accepted in the past no longer are working for people, and they're actively seeking to work around it.
Yeah, and the good news is, the data on improving well-being is really consistent. When folks feel like their company cares about their well-being and they can engage in things that support their well-being, they're much less likely to leave a job. They're much less likely to experience burnout. They're more likely to be thriving. They're more likely to trust leadership. There's all kinds of benefits that happen. And then, of course, those related healthcare costs, because when we're not thriving, anxiety, depression, illness all goes up. And so healthcare costs also improve when you've got a thriving workplace.
Well-being is a huge category, and it affects so many aspects of both our physical, emotional, maybe even mental health. So are there particular areas that we're talking about here when it comes to the costs, but also the benefits of driving more well-being at work?
Yeah, I would point to the research by 2 main groups right now. Gallup is doing a lot of research around well-being in the workplace, and they're finding that, they're measuring well-being globally and in different industries. So I think that's a good place to look. Also, the U.S. Surgeon General made workplace well-being a big focus. And so they have a report called Workplace Mental Health and Well-being. And they've identified 5 key essentials for workplace well-being. So the first is protection from harm, right? We feel physically safe. We feel psychologically safe at work. The second is connection and community. We feel like we belong. There's opportunities to form relationships. Then there's work-life harmony. So there's that balance of working hours and not being overtaxed all the time. The fourth category is mattering at work, feeling like your contribution makes a difference, feeling like your manager cares about you. And the fifth category is opportunity for growth, feeling like there's an opportunity to learn and also achieve, use your strengths to achieve good things. So those 5 areas, I think, are really a great recipe for any organization to lean into.
Yeah, so it's about uncovering a person's best self, physical, emotional, communal, feeling like they matter and feeling like they can do things that matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
So emotional intelligence is the pathway to creating healthier, happier, more connected workplaces. Emotional intelligence really starts with a understanding of oneself, isn't it?
Correct. So Daniel Goleman's the original researcher in this space, and he kind of identified 4 quadrants, right? So the first is self-awareness, and we really have to understand our own emotions and how we're feeling and what triggers us. Then the second category is self-control. Can I regulate my emotions? Can I manage myself in difficult situations? And then that leads us to the third, which is our ability to be aware of others. So now that I can read emotions in myself, I can read them in others. I can start to have empathy. I can start to connect with people and appreciate differences. And then the fourth category is really using those skills to build more positive, healthy relationships. So, and that can take a lot of different focuses, like being an effective communicator. If you're a leader, developing others, and being an inspirational leader, facilitating team performance, and then being able to do things like manage conflict or successfully go through change.
So would you say that toxic workplaces are the result of leaders who haven't really undertaken the interior work of reflecting on who they are and who they can be?
I think so. I think the data is really clear that people get promoted to managers because they were great individual contributors, but that's not the skill set that makes a great manager. The good news is you can learn those skill sets, and a big key element of that is emotional intelligence. But even if you never manage, emotional intelligence is a skill set that really distinguishes top performers in any role from the rest. And a lot of HR leaders and executives look at people's emotional intelligence to identify who's ready for promotion and leadership opportunities. But we have this bit of a problem where folks get put into that role and they don't have that skill set, and so they may not be good at managing their emotions. They may be getting angry at people and creating toxic workplaces by micromanaging or even harassing people, undermining work either intentionally or unintentionally. But what we know is when someone develops their emotional intelligence, they start to manage things that make them not show up as their best self. They're having a bad day, they're able to not take it out on others. But in addition, then they start to notice others' feelings and can care more about others and demonstrate that care through their words and actions.
Yeah, you said something there that's, I think, super important. I want to underline it. IQ, intelligence, natural intelligence, that's fixed, but EQ, emotional intelligence, that's learnable. That can be developed. And I think a lot of people out there think that I am who I am and this is who I'm going to be, but that's not the case, is it?
Well, you're really distinguishing between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. The data on IQ, intelligence, it's not fixed. And IQ really only measures a couple forms of traditional school-based knowledge, typically linguistic and mathematical and logical analysis kind of stuff. So anyone can learn new skills at any time in their life. And so that's really that distinction between, do you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? But the truth of the human brain is we can form new neural pathways up until the moment of death. So anything can be learned or improved throughout our lifetime.
So for someone who wants to improve and develop a higher level of emotional intelligence, where's the best place to start?
Well, I think the first place to start is to first of all, take a training or a course or buy a book, lean into learning more about emotional intelligence. But really the first place is this idea of self-awareness. So do you know what you're feeling at any one point in time? I think a really great fun activity to do is to watch the movie Inside Out, or the new one that's just coming out, Inside Out 2. They've done a really great job of showing how emotions work and how they sometimes can get the better of us. And then, you can do some assessments so you can see how you perceive yourself in relation to how others perceive you. And all of that will lead you to get more confident in your ability to really read your own emotions. And there's a thing called the emotions wheel. So you can also play with that and start to say, what feeling am I feeling? What am I feeling at this moment? And then the self-control part is really understanding how to regulate your emotions. There's going to be things that take you out what scientists call your window of tolerance, which is where you're able to function pretty well and manage things. But let's say you just have a really bad day or a bunch of things pile on. You can go out of that window to either hyper arousal, where you're fired up and intense and more likely to have emotions of aggression or, anger, frustration, or you can go to hypoarousal, which is where you kind of shut down and check out and start to have kind of numbness or depression or disconnection. So being able to kind of know, how do I stay in my window? And then what's my pattern? Do I tend to go to hyper or hypoarousal? And then what are the things you do to bring yourself back into that window? We all should have that toolkit with us at any time so that we can regulate our emotions.
So you're working for a boss that isn't very self-aware and hasn't shown an interest in really developing deeper self-awareness. What can you do to help work that situation in your favor? You can't force someone to be more attuned to their own feelings. What can we do to control the situation for ourselves?
One is you can start to pay attention to how does this person impact me and learn how to regulate your emotions. You can also do a lot of things to prepare to go into that situation, so you're shielded up a little bit and you maybe have some tools to use in the moment. If you feel like the person is open to learning, you can certainly try to educate them and give them feedback, and see if they're open to learning and growing. And then ultimately, is this worth your time and energy? I left one job because I was spending all of my time in therapy trying to manage that job. And I realized this was it wasn't a good use of my time and energy, right? A little bit of that was helpful to learn how to kind of manage difficult relationships. But when you're doing it all day, every day, not a good use of my time. So I ultimately left that boss. And sometimes it's like we can stay at the company, but get a different boss. And sometimes we need to leave the organization because the whole organization has some toxicity in it.
So empathy really is the signature skill of emotional intelligence. Are there particular pathways that you've noticed in the research that allow people to develop a deeper sense of empathy, to practice and perfect that capacity to not only know how others are feeling, but to feel how others are feeling?
Yeah, the real key to empathy is to look at what someone is experiencing in the moment and not imposing how I would feel in this situation. Like if I was in their situation, this is how I would feel. That is not empathy, right? That's projecting. Empathy is going, this person seems to feel really sad, or they're feeling really like they don't belong somewhere. When's a time I have felt like I didn't belong? When's a time I have felt really sad? So connecting to the feeling, even if it didn't match the circumstance, that's how we have empathy. And then the second thing is not trying to fix it. Oftentimes when we move into here's what you should do or here's what worked for me, we're not being present with how they're feeling. So it's identifying the feeling in yourself and then really being able to use that as a place of like, I'm here to support you. I hear how you're feeling, and really just acknowledging what's going on for them.
Yeah, there's so many ways that we can help make work for other people, but it really starts with us. The most recent book is Wired to Become, and the author is Britt Andreatta. Britt, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.